Hello, everyone. My name is Caoimhe Ni and I am interviewing two of our guests this evening for Seattle's 2021 Irish Fest activities for St. Patrick's Day. My guest, on the one hand, is a journalist who primarily works through the Irish language, that is Caoimhe Ni Chonchoille, and her husband, Robert O'Driscoll, who is the Consul General of Ireland for the Western United States. So, welcome to you both. My first question for you is for you, Caoimhe. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background in the Irish language? Are you a native speaker, or did you learn your Irish mostly at school, or where did your Irish come from?
Yeah, so Kevin, I'm from a place called Crawley in Gweedore. It's in the Donegal Gaeltacht, so that's one of the Irish language speaking areas in Ireland. It's on the northwest coast. So I was brought up as Gaeilge in Irish. My mother was a fluent Irish speaker, but my father wasn't. But I suppose I'm the eldest. When I was born, I suppose he appreciated and he understood the importance of raising me bilingually, and that's what they did. But I suppose because mum was home all the time, my dad worked, Irish became the dominant language. So I had Irish before I had English. And eventually my dad learned Irish. He learned, I suppose, as we learned. So we spoke Irish in our house all the time. I went to an Irish language school, and then I went to university and I studied Irish and English. And from there on, I worked in the Irish language media. So I've brought the Irish language with me from kind of childhood through my working life, and now raising a 2-year-old as Gaeilge here in the States.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. And what about you, Robert? What's your background with the Irish language? Are you like most Irish people, you learn it in school and maybe don't emerge really fluent in it, or what's your background with the language?
Díbit cuiimhín agus go agus up don Irishoir sin. Well, look, so clearly I'm not a Caoimhe a native speaker. I'm from Dublin. Neither of my parents spoke the language at all in our house growing up. But I had three very strong influences in my life. My grandfather, who is from West Cork, he grew up speaking Irish fluently. He had fluent Irish. My godmother and my aunt, Mary, she was also a very good Irish speaker, really loved the language, and had a number of great teachers in school. Probably the one that stands out is Sean Culligan, my Irish language teacher in Terrier College, my secondary school. And from a very young age, I had a real passion for the language. I thought it felt to me an important thing for me to know, for me to understand, and for me able to use in a kind of proficient manner. I went to the Gaeltacht in the summer for the camps there. And so for a long time, the language was kind of very important to me and something that I treasured. And I think probably meeting Caoimhe and her background only kind of made that more so the case. And I think when we found out that Caoimhe was pregnant, I was very keen that we'd be able to raise Cuan bilingually, because I didn't grow up in an Irish household, and I saw the value of growing up in an Irish speaking household with Caoimhe, and going up to her house up in Donegal, where they still all speak at Irish, and at Christmas when we're up there, everyone speaks Irish in the house. And it's funny for me because when I'm immersed in that kind of environment, it starts coming. It takes me about 4 or 5 days, but by the kind of 6th or 7th day, I'll start kind of launching in, making mistakes left, right, and centre. But they tolerate me, and
at this stage, we can't say anything about him because he understands us.
That's a vital part of learning the language at this point. So, and then in my job now, like the promotion of the Irish language overseas, the support for people to learn the language overseas as a connection to Ireland, but also as a mutual point around a minority language, talking to other people here who have minority languages and their experience. I find the language is just a really, really important part of my job, and very proud to be able to speak. I think almost every public event I do, I speak in Irish for some part of it, because I want to make that point that it is so important to us, and it is important to me personally. So yeah, no, I'm McCoon, of course. And McCoon's very funny, right? Because like he's obviously living in an English speaking world in the West Coast here, but we speak Irish to him almost all the time. So his first thing he ever said to us was, "Sullis on," and I thought to myself, yeah, that's about right. Good bit of Irish, a little bit of English, and that's kind of been him the whole way through since then.
Well, and I'm very interested in talking to you guys about raising your son Cuain through Irish. I'll have a couple of questions before we get to that, just about, again, background and familiarity with Irish. Caoimhe, I'm interested in particular as a native speaker, especially when you were living in Ireland and you meet people. Obviously, you met Robert for the first time. What kind of reaction do you get from people who generally, when you meet them and they understand you're a native speaker? Because obviously, there are the native speakers in Irish or fluent speakers in Irish are really a minority in the population. So, in general, what kind of reaction do you get from people when you meet them and they realize, oh, you speak Irish fluently or natively?
I have to say, I get overwhelmingly, it's a positive reaction. Historically, there was probably baggage surrounding the Irish language, and it wasn't always positive. It was quite negative. But I think like the introduction of like Gaelscoileanna, they're the immersion Irish language schools, especially in urban areas. Things like TG Cahir, which is the Irish language TV station, they have changed the perception of the language. So it's now seen, whereas traditionally it might have been seen as kind of a dying language, it might have been associated with poverty years and years ago, whereas now it's seen as like something that's really modern, something that's unique to us and to our identity, and something to be proud of. And you can see that, as I mentioned, the immersion schools, it's really hard to get into some of them in Dublin now. There's a waiting list because people see the value of it. So yeah, the reaction at home, and I have to say the reaction here as well has been really positive. And what's been really refreshing here in San Francisco, I bring Cuain to the playground most days. And because we live in such a multicultural city, you hear different languages all the time. So me speaking my own language to Cuain is the most natural thing in the world to everyone else. And no one asks me, why have you decided to speak Irish to your son? It's just taken for granted that I'm an Irish person. I speak Irish, therefore I would speak it to my son.
Have you guys had a chance to bring Cuain home yet? Obviously with COVID, he was obviously relatively young when all this COVID started. I'm curious, have you guys had a chance to bring him? Because I also raise my children through Irish in the United States, and I've told a few friends this, and I totally agree with what you're saying. I get what you're saying about being in San Francisco, and I feel very comfortable speaking Irish in Spokane. I sometimes feel a little bit different in Ireland. I'm sometimes a little afraid that some people will think I'm being pretentious by speaking Irish to my kids, or there's some kind of ulterior motive. So I don't know. Again, maybe Cuain has been too young to go back to Ireland. Or maybe if you're back with your family in Donegal, obviously that would be the kind of default anyway. But have you had any experience like that, or are there difference between Ireland and US?
I mean, I've been really struck by how my own mother has taken to it. Like my mother has no Irish whatsoever. But when we told her we were raising Cuain through Irish, she's now on the Duolingo app, and she's trying to get her words down. So I mean, I actually think that him being hopefully raised in Irish and being fluent in Irish, I actually think has been quite an inspiration for some of my own family, and they've really kind of taken it on as a challenge to do something that they wanted to do. And I think that's the overwhelming feeling I get from people when we speak, even Irish-born people here who meet, when we're speaking in Irish to them, they say like, "Geez, I did it in school. I would actually love to go back and do it again." That's kind of the overwhelming feeling we get back. And certainly with my own mother, she yesterday or last weekend, she was on the phone on the video to him, and she said, "See she is, Cuain, see she is," and I was blown away. Like even for my mother, who did no Irish whatsoever, it was a real and she's very proud of herself. She's very proud of that as an accomplishment for her. She's in her 60s now. She'll thank me for saying that. But I think it's been really, really good for her to have that experience.
I think as well, she feels more comfortable speaking Gaeilge to a child because she knows she's not going to be corrected and there's no judgment. And I think you probably feel the same as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, when I was so I've had the exact same. My father, he's older than your mother, and he also got the Duolingo app, and also began using what Irish he had with my children. My aunt, who comes over pretty regularly, the same thing again, would not have spoken Irish in a long time. So I've been, within my family, I've certainly found they were very supportive of it. It was more again, and maybe just my own kind of concern about, oh, is this going to come across the wrong way to people? I think you both have hit the nail on the head in terms of that there is a lot of positive attitudes towards the Irish language in Ireland. That being said, there are some people, a minority perhaps, but people who have maybe strong negative feeling towards the language as well. I'm wondering, in particular, Caoimhe, have you ever experienced any kind of negativity or kind of even maybe hostility because you're an Irish speaker or associated with the Irish language? A lot of people in particular like to bring up the teaching of Irish in school one way or another, even if that's nothing to do with the fact you're a native speaker, but sometimes it produces a response. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
I have not personally, no, but I know what you're saying. I've heard radio stations at home where, you know, the topic of Irish is being discussed, and it's always discussed in a negative way, as in, you know, is the teaching of the Irish language a waste of money? But like if people aren't hostile towards the Irish language, people are going to be hostile towards different things. I don't take it personally, and as you said, they're in the minority, and they probably have their own reasons. It could be their own insecurities. It could be a number of different things. But I don't think about it too much, to be honest. It's part of who I was brought up with Irish. It's part of who I am, and like it's just very normal to me to speak it.
Well, thank you. So I've one last question specifically for you, Caoimhe, and then I will talk a little bit about you guys having a bilingual household in the United States. Can you just talk to us a little bit about your career in the Irish language media, Caoimhe, and how you got started and your experience in general?
Yes, I was really lucky, and I suppose it speaks to the argument as well that Irish language is the teaching of Irish is a waste of money because there are no career opportunities. Like definitely that's not the case, especially now as well with the Irish language becoming an official language of the EU. And they're looking for translators, and many jobs are being available there. But from my own experience, so I started off, my very first job was as a director researcher with a children's program in Coolacare on TG Car, and I spent 2 years there, and it was amazing. Because TG Car at that stage, they were a relatively new station, so it was full of young, ambitious people, really creative, and they've done amazing things for the Irish language. Even now we have the Coolacare app on our phone. It's one of our resources for helping Cua
and me.
And Robert.
I know a lot of animal names now because of the Coolacare app, so big fan.
So from there I went, I moved then to the newsroom, to Nuacht, TG Car and Nuacht RT. So I became a reporter and a part-time anchor there for 10 years, and I loved it. I travelled around the world covering different stories in Europe, here in the States as well. And what really surprised me, every single place I went to, from Bahrain to Las Vegas here in the States, I was able to always find an Irish speaker to interview. So we're everywhere, and I thought that was really encouraging as well. And people, like often at home, if I had to do a story where I had to interview people on the street, and you ask someone, do you speak Irish? Will you do a short vox pop about whatever the news story of the day was? People would be kind of hesitant to use their Irish, even if they had really, really good Irish. Whereas abroad, people were delighted to be able to use their Cuffla Foca because they probably didn't get the opportunity to do so very often. So that was great. So I'm on career break at the moment, and once we go back home, I go back to work, and I'm really looking forward to it. And it's really nice as well to be, because Irish is such a part of my home life, it's really nice to be able to go to work and speak Irish to your colleagues. That was like a huge advantage as well. I was very lucky.
Well, and you mentioned Irish in your home life, and obviously you mentioned the fact that as growing up, Irish was the predominant language in your home. Can both of you talk to us a little bit about the decision to raise Cuan through Irish? I mean, was there any debate? Was it always going to be, especially for you, Caoimhe, always through Irish? Or did you have a bit of back and forth? I ask this because I know two very good friends of mine who both are fluent Irish speakers, not native, but learned it and are now Irish teachers. They only speak to each other in Irish. They live in Dublin, but as far as I know, they only speak English to their child. So it's not automatic that people will speak. Even Irish speakers will speak Irish to their children. So if you guys could both maybe say a little bit about that decision and how much debate there was about it.
Oh yeah, so that's the case as well with people in the Gaeltacht. I know people in the Gaeltacht who are both Irish speakers but still choose to raise their families through English. For me, really, it wasn't a decision because I was raised through Irish, and I suppose it was partly because my dad made the decision to speak Irish, to learn Irish. For mum, like it was very easy, as it is for me, because it's something that I already had. But for dad, it was a conscious decision to learn the language and to speak it. And the same applies to Robert. And I have huge admiration for people who do that, because it does take time and dedication. And it's hard work as well, when it's much easier to just change to English, and English is the dominant language around. So to me, no, it wasn't a decision. I was going to speak Irish to Cuan regardless. Also with us probably moving home in the next couple of years, I wanted him to go to a Gael school, and I knew that would be important for him to have like the foundation.
Yeah, I mean, from when I first met Caoimhe, I wanted to, and going to Donegal, I always wanted to kind of speak in Irish, and it was a real opportunity for me to take a passion that I had and really apply it. And I remember, and it's kind of a funny story about it. The first time I was up in Gweedore, and Caoimhe's mum asked me to go to the shops to get a few messages. So honestly, I got the list, knew most of them. A few might look up on the internet. I was like, I'm quids in here. I know exactly what I need to do. Down to the shops, can't manage, went to everything. One of the things I needed to get was sausages. So I went up to the butchers and I said, go on, Spini le the hull. And your man looked at me and he was like, okay. And I was like, Spini le the hull. And he's like, I'll spare you. And I said, sausages. He says, up here we just call them sausages. And I said, all right, grand. So that was interesting, even from looking at, because obviously I learned Gaeilge from Connemara, whereas Caoimhe learned Gaeilge, and obviously there's in Donegal they use that kind of almost, obviously only Irish, but then there's all these hybrid words that they use as well, which are interesting. But with Cuan, I think it wasn't a debate. I mean, it was something I was really, really happy and proud to do. And the idea of having a son who is bilingual is something that would make me very proud. But in the doing of it, I think I have gotten the best out of it, because like Caoimhe knows the language, but I am learning the language with Cuan in a way that I haven't done in a long time. So we read all the books together, and we do all the apps together. We do all those learning pieces we do together, and that's been really. And I sing songs to him in Irish, and he learns the words. So like we've it's been a real bonding piece for us as father and son, and I've just loved it. I loved every minute of it. So I feel very, very blessed to have had the opportunity to do it.
I wonder if you could both say a little bit of what it looks like maybe on a day-to-day basis in your house in terms of who speaks what language to who. I mentioned I'm raising my children through Irish, and my wife's American, so I speak only Irish, nothing but Irish. My wife, she obviously, like yourself, Robert. I mean, obviously she wouldn't have the same background in having learned Irish at school or gone to the Gaeltacht, but she picks up a lot simply by hearing it all the time. She primarily speaks English, and then our children kind of speak a mix of the two. What's it that you both only speak Irish to Cuan? Is someone speaking some English, or what's it kind of look like on a day-to-day basis?
So we both speak English to each other.
Yeah.
And we only speak Irish then to Cuan.
And so does he pick up English from listening to you, or does he primarily speak Irish, or a mix of Irish and English like you mentioned earlier on, Robert?
It's a mix. Yeah. So I mean, I think
the majority would be Irish.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. I think so. So we both speak Irish to him solely now. Obviously, as he gets older, it might be a little bit more difficult for me to keep up with that stuff. I'll have to develop. But the reality is like, obviously we speak in English to each other, and Irish isn't that good. And he's also like, he's the TV. If the TV or radio is on, that's primarily in English. So I would say that
his books are primarily in English.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges, like for me, is getting enough content as Gaeilge for him to consume. Like that's where stuff like the Coola 4 app, a Coola Car app, has been really helpful, because the shapes in them, like all the different pictures, and you can pick them out, like Mitog and Olcavan, Perton. So he loves that, and he really engages with that. But there really just isn't enough. Overwhelmingly, the material that's out there is in English. So that's a challenge. But we certainly, I'd say a good third of everything that we read to him is in Irish, as much as we can, and we try to keep that as high as possible.
What has really helped as well is FaceTime with my family back at home, because when he FaceTimes, they speak only in Irish to him. So that's been great. And the other thing as well is probably lockdown in a way, because we haven't been seeing anyone else. So he's like in his own little immersion school here.
Yeah.
Is he conscious yet that there's two languages, or is it all? I mean, that mommy and daddy speak one language and you speak another, or is he still a little young to have fully separated that? Because that's a process for children. It's not something it takes a little time for them to understand that, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like there are certain words where he knows the English and the Irish.
Yeah.
He can count in English and in Irish.
Colours, English and Irish.
Yeah, colours, English, Irish.
But he learned in both those cases. He learned both the numbers in Irish first, and he learned the colours in Irish first.
Yeah, and he learned them in English through TV, through his cartoons, or through books. So I'm not sure if he's aware of there being two different languages. But
he puts them together, which is the bit I find very interesting. That he has no problem moving from Irish to English in explaining what he wants to say.
Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, it's very natural to him to mix them, it seems.
And I asked you guys already a little bit about the challenges, I guess, and you had already addressed this, I guess, Robert. Maybe you just finish by saying a little bit about how you envision the kind of evolving role of Irish in your household going forward. You mentioned you're going back to Ireland. I assume, Caoimhe, the plan is just to continue speaking Irish to Cuan, and that's that. And Robert, it sounds like you at some stage might have to make a bit of a decision about a mix of both or what to do. I'm just curious if you guys have thought a little bit more about what the future, I guess, holds for your household from a linguistic point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I suppose as a diplomat and as someone whose family is going to have a career traveling, languages and linguistics are always going to be part of what we're doing. So I would say, Irish is part of a broader plan that we have. So I think we want to have Irish to be a foundational language in our household. I think for school-wise, for Cuan, that means Irish language schools. I think that's really, really important. I think for me, it means probably some form of immersion up in the Gaeltacht again. I wouldn't mind I'd like to do that. It's something that's supported by the Irish Civil Service. And we have a lot of people. A lot of my you've seen a lot of ministers doing it, and Chuck Daly and August the Secretary Generals.
Uachtaran.
Yeah, Uachtaran. Yeah, you can see it's a very important part of the public sector, which is it's something I want to do more of anyway. And then on top of that, for us, the question is, I think, what other languages that we look at. So for me as a diplomat, I'm thinking probably need to go back and start I did French in school and at college, probably need to go back and do French as well. I mean, one of the great sort of other advantages to all this, I think, is if Cuan can master Irish and English and be very comfortable in 2 languages. And my hope is that he'll be more comfortable in 3 or 4 or 5 languages. And I mean, even in his, at the moment, he's going to childcare and he's learning Spanish there, right? So I hope that he'll be, I am on languages wouldn't be a strength of mine, but I'm really hopeful that's something he will have, that he has, 3 or 4 languages, and I'd be super proud of that.
Yeah, I think as well, the fact that we will probably be traveling in the future, I think it's really important for him and for us to give him the Irish language, because it's a way for him to feel connected to Ireland when he's abroad, for it to be part of his identity. So that's probably one of the reasons why we'll continue with it. And as Robert said, languages as well, like research has shown that bilingual children can learn, it's easier for them to learn a 3rd or a 4th language. So we'll see.
Inshallah, mashallah, as my good friends in Arabia would say.
Well, thank you both very much for your time. On behalf of Irish Fest Seattle 2021, Robert and Caoimhe, Gurb Mila Maha Guibh, thank you both very much, and have a happy St. Patrick's Day.